You open your results, and there it is. One word: African. Maybe it reads Nigerian or Senegambian, and you look at it the way you would read a return address, expecting it to tell you where you came from. It does, and it lies. In 2020, researchers at 23andMe, publishing in the American Journal of Human Genetics, ran the DNA of about 50,000 people against the records of 36,000 slave voyages. The word on your screen stands in for something the old paperwork was built to erase. Your result is not a label. It is a document. Picture a letter that arrives with the return address torn off. You can still read the postmark, the faint round stamp the post office pressed into the paper at the city where the letter began. The handwriting is gone. The sender's name is gone. But the postmark survived, and from that one smudge, you can work backward to the place it started. For millions of American families, the slave trade tore the return address off. It cut people away from their names, their languages, their home villages, and it did this on purpose, because a person with no recorded origin is easier to own. The first roughly 20 enslaved Africans stepped off a ship at Point Comfort, Virginia in 1619. After that, the ledgers mostly counted bodies, not people. Even today, few African Americans can follow a family line past the 1870 census, the first one that wrote down every black person by name. So, the address is gone. The postmark is not. Your DNA is the postmark, the faint stamp pressed into you at the place your ancestors began, and it survived 400 years of paperwork designed to wipe it out. The shipping records we do have point to two regions, again and again. The Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, which catalogs the voyages themselves, shows that close to a quarter of the Africans brought to North America were shipped from Senegambia, the coast of modern Senegal and Gambia, and close to another quarter from the Congo-Angola region farther south. Two doorways on a vast map. Hold that, because the postmark in your DNA does not always agree with the ledger, and the disagreement is the whole story. This is where the 2020 study comes in. Stephen Micheletti and a team at 23andMe took the DNA of about 50,000 people of African descent on both sides of the Atlantic and laid it against 36,000 recorded voyages. It is the largest reading of this particular postmark anyone has done. What they found is that African American DNA does not point to one place. It points to four: Nigerian, Senegambian, coastal West African, and Congolese. Four broad regions strung along the Atlantic edge of Africa. The overwhelming majority of African Americans carry ancestry from all four, not one homeland, but four doorways, blended together by 2 centuries of forced movement. Now look at the results screen again. It usually hands you one word, the biggest slice of the pie. For a large share of African Americans, that biggest slice reads Nigerian. The study saw the same thing. Nigerian came up in more people, more strongly than almost any other region, but the ledgers do not agree. When you count the actual voyages that left the Bight of Biafra, the stretch of coast that includes Nigeria, the number of people shipped straight to the United States is far smaller than the amount of Nigerian DNA walking around the country today. The postmark says Nigerian, loud and clear. The shipping record says, not from here, not directly. 2 documents, same people, and they contradict each other. So, which one is wrong? Neither. They are describing 2 different journeys, and the gap between them is a piece of history hiding in plain sight. When the researchers brought in historians, the answer came together. People taken from the Nigerian coast were often shipped first to the British Caribbean, to islands like Jamaica and Barbados. They were held there, then sold a second time from the Caribbean into the United States. Historians call it the intra-American trade, the buying and selling of people who had already crossed the ocean once. It ran heavily between 1619 and 1807. That second sale leaves no clean line on a manifest from Nigeria to Virginia. On paper, those people arrived from the Caribbean. In the DNA, they still carry the Nigerian postmark from the first leg. There is honest scientific argument about this too. Some geneticists point out that the reference databases lean heavily on a few well-sampled Nigerian groups, so a slice of that Nigerian signal may be the database talking, not only the slave routes. Your result is built from whoever the company happened to sequence first. That is worth knowing when a test sounds certain. Either way, the Nigerian on your result is rarely a straight line back to Nigeria. It is a line to the African coast, then to a holding island, then to a port in the American South. Compressed into one label, your test had no room to explain. The map redraws itself the moment you know the route. And there is a darker mirror to it. Senegambia, those people shipped from Senegal and Gambia, shows up far less in the DNA than the heavy shipping records would predict. Part of the reason is brutal. Many Senegambians were sent to the rice plantations of the Carolinas and Georgia, wetlands soaked with malaria, where the death rate ran so high that fewer of them lived long enough to pass their DNA. Forward. The postmark is faint there not because few arrived, but because too few survived. If you're finding this helpful, hit subscribe to Beyond the Swab. I break down what your DNA results actually mean every week. Now, the last layer is the one that changes how you read the whole result. Most results that come back with African ancestry also come back with a slice of European, often a quarter, sometimes a third. The screen labels it neatly: British, Irish, French, German, as if a few European ancestors simply married into the family somewhere down the line. The 2020 study, that slice a different way. The team did not just measure how much European ancestry was there, they measured which line it traveled down, the mother's side or the father's side, because some DNA traces only the maternal line and some only the paternal. That lets you ask not just how much, but through whom. The answer was stark, and it pointed one way. African ancestry in these families came down overwhelming through women. European ancestry came down overwhelming through men. The same lopsided pattern showed up across the Americas, in study after study. Sit with what that means, because the test will never say it out loud. A quarter of a genome reading European, arriving almost entirely through fathers' fathers' fathers, is not a record of weddings. It is the genetic record of enslaved women and the men who owned them. The violence is written into the percentages. The tidy pie chart on your screen is, in part, a crime report that no one ever filed. So the European fraction was never a footnote about some distant marriage. It is the DNA holding what the paperwork refused to write down. And the single African region your test names, that one bold word at the top, is only the visible tip of all of it. Underneath sit 4 homelands, a forced detour through the Caribbean, a coast where survival was rare, and a line of women whose names the census left blank. This is why your result is a document and not a label, and documents can be read back. In 2023, a team led by David Reich at Harvard, working with the Smithsonian and 23andMe, did exactly that and published it in the journal Science. They took the DNA of 27 people buried in an unmarked African American cemetery beside an old Maryland ironworks called Catoctin Furnace, people who died between 1774 and 1850, whose names no record kept. Then they searched a database of living people for genetic relatives. They found nearly 42,000. They could see that many of the buried carried ancestry from the Wolof of Senegal and the Congo of Central Africa, regions and relatives pressed back onto people the paperwork had erased. That is what your result is. The same postmark, waiting to be read. So before you close the tab, do one thing. Look at the word your test put at the top and read it as the first line of a document, not the last word on an answer. And tell me, if you've tested, name the one African region your DNA pointed to. One region in the comments. I read them. Your result names a region it can barely see. It does the exact same thing south of the border with Mexican ancestry, and that breakdown is on the screen now.